That's right. Maybe someday, Saved by Zero. I'll be more together. Yes, indeed. War, it's worth absolutely nothing. Unless maybe you got some stock in the military industrial complex, then it's probably worth a lot for you. But let's dig into this. The latest comes as a few hours ago. I was watching Judge Napolitano, and they got the breaking news, as I believe he was speaking with Scott Ritter, that Donald Trump, even though Donald Trump was sounding like a big fantasy fan, Donald Trump has changed his mind. And even though he told us negotiations last week, remember he was on Air Force One. There was that blonde woman behind him, and she was chatting with that dude, and they were up in that big plane. He had the screen next to him. He's like, well, things are going pretty well. We got some good negotiation. We might have to hit him. We might not. Well, it turns out that maybe negotiations weren't going so well because Donald Trump, in addition to continuing his unconstitutional, immoral attempt to try to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump, of course, was planning an attack, according to him, because he just called off the attack this afternoon and the attack was planned for tomorrow. So I don't know, maybe he just likes the Moody Blues Tuesday afternoon. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's a secret to Donald Trump. If you actually could read into all of the songs on his iPod list, you'd find out when he was going to kill people. That might be how it works. I don't know. I can't come back. I don't know how it works, like the Wizard of Oz. So here it is. Breaking news from, of course, the genetically superior Liberty Conspiracy News Notes at my Substack for only the awesome donuts. The donuts. Let's look at it right now. Iran, breaking. But does it mean much? Headline. We need our time travel guy. We'll have to get the time travel guy in. Well, can you get him? All right, they'll call him. He's back in the 1940s. They'll call him up. Thanks, guys. All right, so here's the headline. Trump says he's postponing his scheduled attack of Iran tomorrow at, of course, he says, Middle East leaders' request. So let me ask you, just put in believe, disbelieve, not sure over at Rumble or on X. Do you believe anything he says first, and do you believe this? How about that? I have no idea what to think. I mean, this guy's thoughts they're as bad as the fantasies of like Fantasy Island, like this week's guest star is Sonny Bono. And this comes after Donald Trump posted on Truth Social yet this afternoon. He said, if Iran surrenders, admits their navy is gone and resting at the bottom of the sea, under the sea, and their air force is no longer with us, and if their entire military walks out of Tehran, weapons dropped and hands held high, each shouting, I surrender, hold your head up high, while wildly waving. This is like it's like he's dreaming. If I could have it my way, this would be the way I'd construct my fantasy story. And if their entire remaining leadership signs all necessary documents of surrender and admit their defeat to the great power and force of the magnificent USA, the failing New York Times, the China Street Journal, corrupt and now irrelevant CNN, and all other members of the fake news media will headline that Iran had a masterful and brilliant victory over the United States of America. It wasn't even close. The Democrats and media have totally lost their way. They've gone absolutely crazy, President DJT. Woo! Wow, man. You think maybe Hunter Biden not only left traces of cocaine, but maybe some hallucinogens there while he was there? I don't know. Maybe Donald Trump's I have no idea. Angie, Trump is off his rocker, man. Absolutely. Forget Rocket Man. He's Rocker Man. Off your rocker, that's Trump, he is. That's right, Donald Trump. Man. So let's look at this more closely and more seriously, because obviously there are a lot of lives at stake, and I want to look at a couple of the figures, the Trumpers behind this. First, let's talk about Lindsey Graham. He just will not stop. This dude is the dynamo of deviousness, the devil of death. He just continues to want to use your cash and your kids' cash to play at reconstructing the Middle East. He's like a one-man British Empire. He's like, well, I'll put this chess piece over here, and I'll put this chess piece over here, and that'll go over here. It's unbelievable. It's almost becoming darkly comic that he does not stop his claims about what he would do. And wait till you hear some of the things he says and some of the things that we hear other people say, like Mr. Kane or Mr. Keene, and also Thomas Massey's opponent. Remember last week when we played Mr. What's his name? Columbine. I don't know what his name is. But anyway, I know. But remember how he said, we're losing America's traditions. America's losing its way. I have to ask, what is that way? And this seems to be the warmongers' way. They're going to define what is Americana for us, and you better sacrifice.
Sanctions being passed by the Congress that will allow the president to put tariffs and sanctions on the shadow fleet and any country that buys cheap Russian oil to prop up Putin that doesn't help Ukraine can be tariffed. He put a 25% tariff on India, President Trump did, for buying Russian oil. There'll come a moment here where China is going to have to be held accountable for what they're doing. And without China buying Iranian oil, their economy would collapse. So where are we with Iran? I think we've hit a wall when it comes to negotiation.
He says, I think we've hit a wall when it comes to negotiations. So he wants to lay pressure on China. Trump has already applied massive tariffs against Chinese goods. What did that do to the U.S. economy? Does Donald Trump actually think that the Chinese won't respond by withholding rare earth minerals that are essential for the U.S. death machine? Is that what Lindsey Graham thinks? And what is it about Lindsey Graham that seems to get him thinking that happenings in the Middle East that have something to do with Iran wanting to overthrow Israel, wanting to overthrow Iran, should get you to have to work harder and more hours in your job so that he can get money to send weapons to block the Persian Gulf in some quixotic attempt to do so, which isn't working, then sees attacks, of course, just prior to that, attacks on Iran, and sees Iran respond by them blocking any ships associated with the U.S. and Israel, which has a direct effect on your pocketbook. There's an easy way to fix this. Live in peace. Don't think that the Iranians are the aggressors. Stop giving weapons and money to Israel. Get the U.S. out of it altogether and stop assuming that all of us in my little neighborhood should have to support your crazy ideas. If you want to write a check for Israel, you go ahead and do so. You be supporting murderers and rapists and thieves. But I don't quite understand Donald Trump's attempt to try to involve all of everybody here in something happening around the world. But now that he's gotten involved with the Israelis over and over and over again, it's having a detrimental effect on you, and Lindsey Graham wants to make it worse. It's astounding. Now let's look at General Keene. This one is just incredible. He seems to think that this can be a big success story.
I think President Trump has exercised an enormous amount of strategic patience here. He was given some indications that these guys were willing to make a deal, and he's given them 5+ weeks to come forward with something. And obviously what they were doing, their objective was, I think, to delay, not to make a deal. And the president has ran out of patience. I don't think there's any deal to be made here. And the problem I've always had with the deal, even if the deal is perfect, what we do with any deal is we have to give them money to adhere to what they want in the deal. They want their frozen assets to be given to them. That's $100 billion. They want sanctions removed. If we ever did that, what are we really doing? The regime not only survives, but we wind up financing their recovery.
Okay, so we end up financing their recovery. You know, with the money that since the late 70s, the United States has had stolen from the Iranians and stored in escrow in other countries. That's what General Jack Keane is discussing there. That's why people were critical of Obama giving back just a small percentage of that stolen loot. And Jack Keane says, we're going to end up paying them. Dude, it's their friggin' money. It's not your money. It's their money, not yours. What is wrong with you? What a jerk. It's just, it's jaw-dropping, these people. Talk about a blank slate. Incredible. Now, let's talk about more of what I think you might find interesting. We've got Maria Bartiromo and Ro Khanna together. And I think it's astounding to see these people. First, let me show you Maria Bartiromo, because she's got this crazy thought that this money should not be given back. That somehow the United States should continue holding this cash.
But of course, we did litigate this, and we already went through this before, that President Obama actually sent Iran money, as opposed to actually President Trump trying to stop them from having a nuclear weapon. But I want to get your take on.
So she conflates the two. President Trump trying to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. It was Obama as part of the JCPOA where they got an agreement to make sure that the regime that already had a fatwa against nuclear weapons would be even more open to showing that they're against nuclear weapons by allowing for not just the International Agency on Atomic Energy inspectors, but United States inspectors to go in. And they would have settled all that money problem from the 1970s. It would have been water under the bridge. But no, Trump dumped it all, said, we're not giving you any money. And the Iranians still stayed at their low threshold below 10% for another 18 months almost. Jeez.
China said, because the president is making news right now. He just spoke on Air Force One to reporters, and he said that China agreed to buy 200 Boeing planes with the potential commitment of buying 750 jets. He also said that China agreed to buy soybeans, and he said that he would consider lifting sanctions on Chinese companies purchasing oil, but no decision has been made yet. Now, the president said that he did get a commitment from Xi Jinping that China would buy oil from America. We don't know if they're going to keep that promise, but he said they're going to send Chinese ships to Louisiana and Texas to buy American oil. And then on Taiwan, there were other things said, but let me get your take on those deals right now. What is your assessment of this trip?
Sure. I just have to say, for the record, my view is that President Obama didn't give money to Iran. He unfroze Iranian assets, but we can have that conversation some other time. Let me say on Boeing, I'm glad that China is buying their Boeing planes, but they're only buying...
But Congressman, wait, why unfreeze assets? Why give Iran, the leading state sponsor of terrorists, $2 billion so that they...
Because you stole the money, and they're not the leading sponsor of terrorism. The United States is. What in the world? Just the United States support for Israel is the United States leading sponsor of state terrorism right there. Then you got the U.S. overthrowing Ukraine, the U.S. bombing Somalia, killing people in the Caribbean, overthrowing frigging Venezuela, attacking Cuban ships that are trying to bring in fuel, threatening Cuba, and now they got a false flag narrative. How completely off base can she possibly be?
Go give that money to the proxies that they support, like Hezbollah and Hamas. Why unfreeze money?
It was Iranian money that was unfrozen for 97% of enriched uranium to get out of the country.
Right.
President Trump tore that deal up. Now there's tons of enriched uranium.
They never made a commitment
and the reality
to stop building a weapon. So why send them $1.7 billion when you...
Because it's not your money. It's their money. And they don't have to make a commitment not to make any weapons for them to get what you owe them, that you stole from them. You don't have to put conditions on paying them back what you illegitimately have. Is that difficult to figure out? And besides that, you already had a friggin' agreement that was part of the agreement. How thick can you possibly act? She's not stupid. Ro Khanna must have just been sitting there hitting his head afterwards, like, what is going on?
Even have a commitment to stop building a weapon. You yourself said you don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Well, just so we're factual, he didn't send them money. It was their money that was unfrozen. I acknowledge it was unfrozen.
Why unfreeze
what we got out of it is,
you say it was their money. Other people say it wasn't their money. It was stolen money. But that's fine. Let's say it is their money. Why unfreeze the money? That you never got a commitment that they would stop building a nuclear weapon. Why are you sending them $1.7 billion so that they could go give it to Hamas?
He got
so
a
Hamas could
commitment
attack
for 15 years, 97% enriched uranium out. Instead, what did we get? We had them having 60% enriched uranium when Trump tore up the deal. We had 13 American service members dead. We have Americans paying $4 of gas. We have food prices. Let me just finish, Maria. Let me finish, please.
Are you talking about the botched exit from Afghanistan? When
that has nothing to do with Iran. The botch exit, But look at the facts here. Because Trump tore up the deal, Americans are dead. Americans are paying more for food. Americans are paying more for gas. The Strait of Hormuz is less secure. No. And the war is unpopular. 70% of Americans don't want this war. Even Republicans are defecting.
But nobody wants war, but we also don't want a nuclear terrorist.
So let's talk about China.
We don't want a nuclear terrorist to have a nuclear weapon, okay? We don't want a terrorist.
And Obama was on the road to achieving that.
No way. He didn't achieve anything. Obama did squat.
We can talk about...
Obama did squat.
That's not true. Come on.
He unfroze all that money. Look, let's get to Taiwan. He unfroze the money. He gave the money to Iran. What did they do with the money? They gave it to Hamas, Hezbollah, and then they committed atrocities on Israel.
Trump should have built...
That is really something to be talking to a guy like Ro Khanna and on Fox News, which constantly pushes giving more money to Israel, talking about actually giving back what the United States stole and froze in other countries of Iranian assets, and then claiming that they're giving money to terrorist supporters. And of course, Ro Khanna could have brought up, you mean supporting Hamas the way Benjamin Netanyahu made sure tens of millions of dollars went to Hamas. I mean, she has utterly no argument. It's so ridiculous. And even if she had an argument, what does it have to do with you? Why do they have to make decisions about how you have to be involved in any of this? All of this screeching and crying and hand-wringing and utter attacks on each other should have nothing to do with free individuals. You don't have to be part of this collective. You should be free to plant some plants, grow some cucumbers, walk the dog, play with the kids, look at the sky. What in the world? What a disaster. It's come down to this, as Nine Inch Nails would say. It's crazy. And you know, the amazing thing is that she's on a network that totally covers for Donald Trump's stock portfolio purchases. And this information about Trump's stock purchases is metastasizing like a cancer that you just can't stop on the stock market. It's going through the roof, baby. Wait till you see this. This is amazing. Let's go back to the stocks and Trump's coverage of all of those great investments. He ought to be up there with Jim Cramer, you know, banging around, screaming. That'd be great. They could be advertising. They could have advertising with McDonald's. This is the return to the story we covered 2 nights last week, maybe 3 actually. And we talked about NVIDIA. We talked about Boeing. We talked about the Intel purchase of the United States government. We went through the other 10 companies that see now the United States owning 10% of shares of those companies. And I listed those companies ranging from steel companies to chip manufacturers and things like that. But in addition to that, there is, of course, the fact that Donald Trump's own stock purchases are intimately tied with those things. So we noted that last year, when Intel saw that 10% purchase by the U.S. government, well, it turned out, of course, shortly thereafter, NVIDIA invested $5 billion in Intel. And then just a few weeks later, about maybe 8 to 12 weeks later, NVIDIA just happened to get permission from the Federal Trade Commission to be able to sell its H20 and H200 high-speed chips to the Chinese. Now, there should be nothing standing in the way of somebody wanting to sell something to somebody else, because the act of trying to block that sale is an aggressive act, and you're done. You don't need to see anything else. Nobody should be pointing at a gun and saying, well, you people who freely want to sell something and buy something, I'm the peaceful one pointing a gun at you saying no. That's a very basic lesson in political philosophy, meaning the polis is evil. But they use the polis to do that sort of thing. And then, of course, they play favorites and leverage that power like they did with NVIDIA. Well, it just so turns out that Donald Trump invested right before that in, you got it, NVIDIA stocks. Yes. And guess what else he's done? He's done a lot more investing just before things hit it big, thanks to him. Literally hours before in some cases. Check this out. Let's return to the stocks. Trump's 2026 disclosures show 3,700 stock trades worth up to $750 million. Woo! Oh, man. So let me give you this. I just wrote this up real quick for the subscribers. The disclosures filed late with the U.S. Office of Government Ethics and made public last week detail buys and sells in companies like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Amazon, Boeing, and Palantir. What's that? Yeah, the Russians, they're on it. Yeah. Totaling $220 million to $750 million. Unlike past presidents who used blind trusts or passive investments, like that really helps that much, Trump's assets remain in a revocable family trust managed by third-party institutions, drawing a $200 fine for missed deadlines. Sort of reminds you of Jennifer Granholm, right? Yeah, you folks in Michigan, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yes, indeed. Jennifer Granholm working with Proterra, helping them out when the Obama administration put out the GM bailout. She got $6 million of that bailout shaved off, given to Proterra when she was the governor of Michigan. And then right after she leaves the governorship, what brings her on board? Their board? You got it, Proterra. They're an electric vehicle bus manufacturer. And then she's on the board for like 10 months or something. Then just before she goes to become the transportation secretary under Biden, what happens? You got it. That's right. Proterra gives her stock options and allows her to leave. She sells the stock options for millions, and about a month and a half later, Proterra files for bankruptcy. All right. Well, maybe she's like Donald Trump's teacher. Ah, yes, Grasshopper. If you can snatch the stock option from my hand, you will be ready to graduate the Kung Fu School of Trading. And get this, of all people, the real Pocahontas for the little person, Liz Warren, she's actually making another good point. Yep. Critics, including Senator Warren, point to suspicious timings around government approvals and deals, calling it self-dealing, while the White House insists it's fully compliant with ethics rules and fully disclosed. Anybody want to go back in time? Gonna go back in time. Anybody want to go back in time and see how Donald Trump perfected the art of mercantilism? That's right. Remember when he talked about how he wanted to make sure that there was no insider trading? No insider trading. Well, here's our first classroom segment: mercantilism, mendacity, mental illness, and Trump trades. Hey, Donald, what's this from way back, huh? That's right.
As we ensure that all Americans can profit from a rising stock market, let's also ensure that members of Congress cannot corruptly profit from using insider information. They stood up for that, I can't believe. I can't believe it. Did Nancy Pelosi stand up if she's here? Doubt it. Pass the Stop Insider Trading Act without delay.
Look at stolen valor, Blumenthal. He's the senator from Connecticut who claimed he went to Vietnam, and then he got spat upon and abused when he got off the plane. He never went to Vietnam. No, But Tricky Dick Blumenthal will claim the valor for it. Whatever you think is valorous about that, as the Pixies would say, my Valoria. It's a comedy. But Angie had a comment about them arguing. She goes, "Oh my God, two clowns arguing on TV." It really is like going to the circus. You just need you need the elephant poop and stuff like that. Wow, it's astounding. So on the Trump stuff, and we'll start to dig into some of the details on I want to make sure that each night, if there is, of course, something that is important about what's going on in the Middle East, deaths, terrible things going on, I can't not mention these things. It's so important to get this stuff out there. But there you go. We've got, of course, Trump just got exposed for running the biggest insider trading operation in American history. Nancy Pelosi traded $5 million in stocks. Trump literally executed $750 million worth of stock trades in 1 quarter. Yeah, look at this chart. Here's Stanbury. Representative Melanie Stansbury looks like potential insider trading to us. Does this look like insider trading to you? Get this, everybody. Over 3,600 trades by Trump since just January. I can't even fathom how quickly you'd be doing those trades. 3,000 stock trades since January. It's not even June. What in the world? On March 11th, Trump purchased up to $50,000 in Thermo Fisher stock. Later that same day, he toured a Thermo Fisher facility and repeatedly praised the company on camera. Again, taking a page out of the Jennifer Granholm book, because when she joined the Biden administration, she literally set Biden up to go visit the Proterra manufacturing plant before they filed for bankruptcy. So Trump, just before he goes to the Thermo Fisher facility, buys $50,000 in stock. I can't even, it's so bald-faced. It's just crazy. It's like, what in the world? Are you kidding me? Holy smoke. So that ties in. Don't forget, again, we got the NVIDIA trades. We got the Boeing trades. We got the Intel information. Now we've got this about the Thermo Fisher stock. And then that's right, 3,600 trades between January and now. Actually, in just the first quarter. So that was the first 3 months. I don't even know. Oh, man. You know what? And it's funny because you say, I don't even know. That's such a sort of feckless expression. I don't even know. Like, what can you say? The level of depravity and lack of shame, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. And again, we all went through watching the Ukraine situation. We grew up in the shadow of Watergate. And yet, I don't think anybody would have expected Richard Nixon to have a chart like that. Oh, man. It's crazy. Wow. We're going to check out your comments over at Rumble and see what's happening. Now, if I've missed anything, feel free to say hi, put your comments underneath and so on. And do let us know. We've got this from the Front Porch Media. Billionaires in government don't need permission. Yeah, I would say it is absolutely a shocker to think that Nancy Pelosi's been outdone. But, I don't know. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the evening. I'd hammer in the morning. all over this land. I'd hammer out danger. It's really stunning. Wow. And then we've got this comment a little bit higher. So, Ro Khanna was born in Philadelphia to Indian parents, a self-described progressive capitalist. Economic patriotism implies a moral obligation to the community that supersedes obligations to those outside of it, says Smuhosky. Yeah, who defines that, right? I love that. Hey, you're not economically patriotic. You should have a moral obligation to the community that supersedes obligations to those outside of it. Well, at what point can you make decisions for yourself? Right? I think defining for somebody else what is patriotic and economic is a big problem. How about leaving your neighbor alone, right? I don't think a term economic patriotism really carries a lot of weight because it implies a problem. Now, if people want to make their own decisions about buying something from their neighbor, that's one thing. It's up to them. But the minute you start throwing patriotism into the mix, you start getting into this idea of the collective, and people start to criticize other people's purchases. Homie, don't play that, man. Homie, don't play that. The only way you get progress is by weighing stuff out. Maybe some people will want to buy native. Maybe they won't. I don't know. Let's go to a couple other big ones that I think you'll find amusing. Now, let's talk about the mentality in Washington, D.C. And I want to give a nice thank you to David Knight, who sent me a wonderful email this morning, thanking me for filling in for David on Friday. And I recorded something live while David was on, and you probably saw this, showing our friend Mike Schmuckabee. And in a moment, we're going to see how Mike Schmuckabee seems to be blind to many of the attacks on Christian sites in the Middle East that are being conducted by the Israelis. But here is Mike Huckabee's lack of knowledge. And David sets him straight.
That this is a better and a superior covenant that is a fulfillment of what was in the old covenant.
So he's talking about the Christian Zionists who seem to think that the physical state, the political state of Israel, the Zionist state, is a fulfillment of God's word and his covenant. But people who've read the New Testament and understand what Jesus did on the earth know that the new covenant was provided by Jesus and that Israel is the church of Christ now, the people who believe in Christ as the Savior and know that he is the Savior. Those are all the children of Israel now. It's not a physical political place. Besides, how could it be? How could it be a polis when the polis only exists through extortion, theft, and coercion? I don't think that those are biblically appreciated by God.
That's why we call it the Old Testament and the New Testament. Testament is a covenant, essentially. And yet you have people like Mark Levin, and if you don't believe him, you can believe, if you don't believe Mark Levin, that Israel created America, that Israel basically is the basis of Western civilization, then listen to Mike Huckabee. He talks about all the wonderful inventions that we would never have if it weren't for Israel.
We lose a lot in terms of our own national security, our own military capacity.
Yeah, it makes us more secure, doesn't it?
A lot of Americans never think about. I hear people say, I don't want anything to do with Israel. I say, okay, give up your cell phone. Give up car navigation.
You don't want to go to war with Iran, give up your cell phone.
Innovations that may have saved some member of your family's
Give up your pager. Okay, no problem.
life. Be sure, by the way, to give up some conveniences like cherry tomatoes and seedless watermelons while you're at it. And
So let me see if I can figure something out here. Let's say, hypothetically, let's say all of that were true. Imagine the old Egyptian thing with the scale and the feather, right? Is he actually trying to find some moral equivalency to say, oh yeah, you want to dump Israel because, you know, all these murders that are occurring, you know, the corralling of thousands and thousands of people in smaller and smaller areas, 1 million, 2 million people in an area 5 by 25 miles. killing of kids, shooting them in the head and the groin, starvation, controlling of the water supply and electricity. You somehow, well, if you don't want Israel, then, say bye to your seedless watermelon, which again isn't true. But even if it were true, what kind of mentality comes up with that? Literally, this is the guy, again, who had a picnic on the other side of the wall where just about a quarter mile away, people were starving, trying to get through the dirt to a feed station where they were getting shot at. That's Mike Huckabee. So he's actually saying, well, if you're going to do a trade-off here, between all those dead kids and the crushed buildings and the dust with all the bodies underneath it, like a Terminator Part 9, well, say bye to your seedless watermelon, huh? I showed you. There you go, huh? There you are. And you could throw your cherry tomatoes in there too, huh? See? Yeah, now I bet you would love to have all those dead kids now. You won't have your cherry tomatoes, right? Where does a person even think like that? What a scumbag. He is one of the most disgusting people I've ever seen in politics. And he's this sort of soft, loathsome character, like the weird grandpa would be sitting out on his porch with all the dead dogs that he killed from the neighborhood in the back. Unbelievable.
Go ahead and don't buy anything that has an NVIDIA or an Intel chip.
And of course, these guys are there nodding their heads, right? Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yes, well, NVIDIA and Intel, those famous Israeli companies.
Well, give up your cell phone. Well, you may want to give up your cell phone because the only intervention that I can see the Israelis doing is using them as targeted bombs. But they did not invent the cell phone, as a matter of fact. None of the things that he mentioned there, cell phones, cherry tomatoes, seedless watermelon, none of that was invented by Israel. As a matter of fact, the cell phone was invented by an American, Martin Cooper, not Jewish, by the way, an engineer at Motorola. April 3rd, 1973, he made the first public call from a portable prototype New York City sidewalk. While early mobile communication concepts and car-mounted radio telephones existed prior to this, Cooper's invention was the first truly portable handheld device. He did it for Motorola, an American company. It was done by an American engineer trained in America. It was not an Israeli gift, as a matter of fact. It was 50 years ago that he set us down this path. And what about cherry tomatoes? Well, Mike Huckabee is as wrong about cherry tomatoes and cell phones and seedless watermelon as he is about the Bible and about the idea that Israel makes us safer in terms of national security. Cherry tomatoes were not invented by a single person. They were originated from wild tomatoes native to South America, Peru, Ecuador, Chile. First domesticated in Mexico, about 700 AD. So it was Mexicans and South Americans who gave us cherry tomatoes. And it is to say that you modified something, perhaps they did do some genetic modification, but to say that because you modified something, you created it is the greatest stretch that you can have. What do you want to say, Lance?
Well, I mean, if you don't want to go to war for them, then you should stop eating this thing that was developed in Mexico hundreds of years ago.
That's right. I would give up my cherry tomatoes and my cell phone if we could have peace.
Exactly. It's like, what the heck, man? And by the way, Smuhosky, SMU had great comments. I want to go back over to the screen here. And you guys are awesome. So, okay. So I'm scrolling down a little bit, make sure on screen one, I want to make sure I don't miss the comments, SMU, if I got them right here. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show these on the screen, SMU, and I'm going to go backwards, actually. God would have accepted them with open arms, but they would not have him. Okay, so we'll go back up here to the start. Even if they were Abraham, they aren't. A covenant is conditional. It's been broken. Yeah, it's broken. I would like to hear a counter to this argument. Israel is a nation under judgment, as described in the Bible. Why get between God and something he is judging? He would have accepted them with open arms, but they would not have him. Absolutely. And he went back and capitalized it. Man, That's great. Absolutely right. You know, it's these little treats. This is absolutely. Smucky says, I used to call him Smuckabee on my radio show, and I played clips of him. It sounded really stupid. So he says, just twist the knife a little more, guard. I used to watch that jackass too. Huckabee, not David. Yeah, this is a validly. It's just a. And you know, the amazing thing is, how many years was that guy on Fox? And that was the level of the dude's thinking. It's like, what do you have to do to get on Fox and have a show? I don't even know. Like, what level of intellectual capacity do you have? Oh, that's right. You don't have to. You just have to be connected to Israel. In Israel. Yes, that's for you. That's for you, Angie. A little Susie and the Banshees. All right, now let's go to a little something special. This one from Robert Gates. And did I record? I think I recorded this one, but let me just double check on the Robert Gates thing, because it might have been a little bit low. And Robert Gates offering some very salient commentary here. No, I didn't have to record it. All right. So let me show you Robert Gates and his response. And as believable as Robert Gates is, who knows, right? I noted here, I said, former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates might not be the strictest on the U.S. Constitution, but he offers valuable information here regarding Mike Huckabee's pal, Netanyahu, and his thirst to spill Iranian blood. Daniel McAdams. And they brought this up on the Ron Paul Liberty Report today. Monday through Thursday, Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul are on at noontime on Rumble. And they're also on YouTube now. And Daniel says only Trump was stupid enough to listen to Netanyahu. And well, then you have Lindsey Graham. Then you have Mike Huckabee. Everyone else over the decades has been sentient enough to understand that each whisper from that Mephistopheles is a dirty lie. This is classic.
People to overthrow the regime and that Iran would not attack, he said, American targets or oil facilities in the region. That was in 2009, and he was trying to press an American president to do what this American president has done. Was he overly optimistic then, and is he now?
He told me all those things in July of 2009, and I told him then he was dead wrong, that he was underestimating the resilience of the Iranians, that I thought he had been lulled into an unrealistic position by the absence of an Iraqi reaction when the Israelis destroyed the Osirak reactor in Iraq. He'd been lulled by the Syrian lack of reaction when Israel destroyed their reactor. That was during the second Bush administration.
But this is the war he's been trying to sell for years.
And I told him then that this notion he was saying then, the regime is fragile. This is 2009. The regime is fragile. It'll crumble at the first attack and they won't have time to do anything else. I told him then he was wrong.
The regime was historically weak.
But that's okay, because Benjamin Netanyahu made sure to keep rolling. Al Jazeera has put together a 2-minute montage of Benjamin Netanyahu making his Acme bomb claims.
World in 5 continents.
You've probably heard this line before.
Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them.
That's because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying this for more than 30 years, claiming Iran is close to having
nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons, nuclear weapons, atomic bombs.
In 1992, as a member of parliament, Netanyahu addresses the Knesset. He says, within 3 to 5 years, we can assume that Iran will become autonomous in its ability to develop and produce a nuclear bomb. 3 years later, in his book, Fighting Terrorism, he repeats the same time frame, 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fast forward to 2002. Netanyahu testifies before a U.S. congressional committee actively calling for the invasion of Iraq.
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The 2 nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran.
The invasion happens months later. No weapons of mass destruction are found in Iraq. This is a fragment of a 2009 US State Department cable released by WikiLeaks. Netanyahu tells members of Congress that Iran is 1 or 2 years away from being capable of developing nuclear weapons.
They're online.
It's 2012, and Netanyahu is holding up his infamous cartoon bomb at the UN General Assembly.
By next spring, at most by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage.
They'll be at that line there, and then pretty soon they'll be up by that upper part there, and that's the most dangerous part. That's the part that Wile E. Coyote got hurt from that part, and then there's the whole wick thing. They in a few years they might have the technology to make a wick for the atomic bombs. You know how that goes.
From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
And now, 33 years after Netanyahu's first so-called imminent warning, Israel attacks Iran.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
That's despite the US Director of National Intelligence saying Iran isn't building a nuclear weapon months earlier.
Iran lied.
But for Netanyahu,
Big time.
the slogan has been the same for decades. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Oh, man, that's just classic. So great. And they're great comments over on Rumble as well. SMU had a comment in there that I did not want to miss. And there's just so many. Let me put these up on the screen, just quickly scroll through some of these. BB, you asswipe. X Sweets X talking about ticks, by the way. She's got a comment there talking about ticks as we have that picture of Richard Butler from Dumbwaiters on there, which is just such a great song. I think it's probably one of the greatest songs ever created in rock and roll, Dumbwaiters by the Furs. But she says, I heard sulfur dust like you get from gardening works to repel ticks dust from just above the knees down to your boots. I've heard that too. And I don't know if you saw, but I think it was the Russians developed this really interesting cloth that it makes it virtually impossible for the ticks to cling to. Did you see them? And they were like dragging it through these high grasses where ticks typically cling so they can latch onto you and stuff like that. I think they brought it through the halls of Congress.